Welcome back to Five Live Boxing with Costello and Bunce after a weekend in which the action in the ring was dominated by another masterful performance from Naoya Inoue, but there was little action to report on, Steve, at the Tyson Fury-Deontay Wilder press conference in Los Angeles.
You say there was little to report on, Mike, but people have done nothing but talk about what didn't happen. God knows what would happen if they'd have had a 30-minute boring old-fashioned Don King conference where they both said all sorts of things, thanking this executive, thanking some higher being. No, they didn't do any of that, and people haven't stopped talking about it. It was brilliant. I mean, how long is this pod going to be? Are we going to break it down? I mean, the conference itself was full of about 62 words, and we're going to spend an hour talking about it. Bingo! Don't tell me it wasn't a good conference. It was one of the greatest press conferences in heavyweight history.
Hey, maybe less is more. Interviews with Fury and Wilder to come, although in terms of Wilder, not quite that. And we'll be remembering some of the stranger press conferences we've covered down the years and some of the tougher interviews. We'll reflect yet again on the brilliance of Naoya Inoue after his latest success in the bantamweight division, and it's time to trawl through your many emails and responses from elsewhere on a wide range of topics. Safe to say few of you agree with me on the issue of referees and what they should do when towels are thrown into the ring. But first to Fury and Wilder and their press conference in Los Angeles last week. And just before we kick on, Steve, and reflect more on that, it struck me at the weekend watching the match in the Euros between England and Scotland, and how ITV reported the following morning that they'd attracted an audience of 20 million people. If Anthony Joshua against Tyson Fury had gone ahead and was screened on BBC or ITV, would the fight have attracted an audience of that size?
25 million. And I've got no problem saying that. I'm convinced of that, Mike. When Carl Froch was getting 8 and 9 million, when shows on Channel 5 can get 1.5 million, with basically a Southern Area title fight and no build-up, no press whatsoever, I'm telling you, 100% that would have gone way above the 20 million. Because we know what the build-up was like for a fight that didn't happen. Throw that forward, keep it in this country, give us 2 press conferences, give us open days, give us relentless press, front and back page. It would have been like something from the 60s or the 70s, I swear to you. We would have got 25 million guaranteed. And they would have walked away with peanuts, but hey-ho, 25 million people would have seen it. And they would have had the type of legacies that last in all circles, not just inside our boxing bubble.
Moving on, Steve, to talk about the press conference then in Los Angeles last week to mark the fight coming up on July the 24th, the third showdown between Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder. It's for the WBC heavyweight belt that's now held by Tyson Fury. And reflecting again and remembering on all the debates that we've had about Tyson Fury and Anthony Joshua and would the fight take place, when you consider the press conference, I know you're saying that there was plenty to report on as far as the bizarre nature of the press conference, but there is something strange about this fight, almost hollow about this fight. Do you think that's because of the fallout of the expectations around Anthony Joshua against Fury, how badly we wanted that fight to happen, and it's diluted the appeal of this one?
I think it's a combination of factors, Mike. The fact that we had this fight last July, we'd rearranged our flights to get from Las Vegas, where it was meant to take place, directly to Tokyo for last year's Olympics. And last year, it was a terrific fight. I had no problem with it at all last year. I got no problem with it this year. Then I think it was, as I said, I think it was the announcement fatigue. We've talked about that for 2 or 3 months, certainly 2 months before Joshua and Fury collapsed. And then I think it was the rapidity of this announcement in the wake of that collapse, which caught people really off guard on that Monday. We knew basically by the Tuesday of that week, less than 24 hours after we were officially told that Joshua and Fury wouldn't be happening next, we knew that this fight was on. And it's odd. Young Jack came up with a good line, Mike. For once, we managed to get him in something that passes for a studio, not wandering around Finsbury Park with his baby attached to his chest, which is, I don't know how many selfies do you get? I get about 10 a day of him wandering with a baby. It's a baby. It's on your chest. You're out in the sun. We get it, Jack. It's lovely. Now, Jack came up with a great line. He said, and it's true, Mike, and it really fits. I think it describes this fight perfectly. He said there's a weird vibe about this fight. And there is. It's like it's happening. It should be massive, but it's not massive. Then they have a press conference. There should be a press conference, and it is a million miles from a press conference, but we're talking about it. And it's like we've stepped back in time, and we've ignored all of the chaos and confusion that took place and took over Deontay Wilder's life last May, June, July, August, September. So disturbing were some of the things he was saying. And with Tyson Fury, who knows where he is? I interviewed him in August. He was in the best shape mentally and physically I've ever seen him. And in March of this year, he was drinking 20 bottles of beer, wanted to balloon up and didn't want to fight anymore. Even we're susceptible to a bit of fatigue, Mike. I mean, let's get that right. But that's what I think's happened. What do you think it is then? Why is it that it doesn't feel like it should feel? Why is it, do you reckon?
I think part of the reasoning around that press conference, Steve, and the feeling that it didn't really kick off is simply the timing. It happened during a really busy week of the Euros in this country. I'm not saying that would have been the case in the United States, but I do think that's a factor, the timing. And I think the momentum will build once we get to the other side of the Euros in this country, which will still give us almost 2 weeks in the build up to the fight between the final of Euro 2020. Even if England or one of the home nations get there, I think that will have subsided over the course of the following 2 weeks, and there will be a huge build up to the fight on July the 24th. I think also there's a feeling of Tyson Fury has got a case of job done. He did what he did in the rematch, and it's going to be very similar this time around. There's definitely that kind of feeling. The bookmakers have got him long odds on, 3 and 4 to 1 on, as far as they're concerned. So they don't give Deontay Wilder that much of a chance. But there is a kind of narrative building, Steve, that Wilder's now working with Malik Scott, and therefore there could be some changes. But I'm always reminded of something that Enzo Calzaghe said to me, in all those years he had with Joe Calzaghe, and how many of Joe's opponents threatened to do something different with a new trainer or with their same trainer, and they were just working on particular tactics. And Enzo said, under pressure, they will revert to type. Now, I know you could counter that argument by saying that look what Tyson Fury did with a new trainer in the rematch against Deontay Wilder. But there were signs in the past, absolutely clear signs, that Tyson Fury was very capable of boxing on the front foot. It's not as if it was completely alien to him.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I think there is, a bit of skepticism as to how much one man, one trainer, Malik Scott, can change in Deontay Wilder. So I think, again, like you said, I think there are a number of factors surrounding this fight, but it is a big heavyweight fight. It does involve Tyson Fury. It does involve still one of the most fearsome punchers of all time. And I think the momentum will build as we get closer to it. But I do think there is a real fallout in terms of the fans catching on to this particular fight and attaching themselves to this fight because of the expectations and the real feeling that AJ against Fury was going to happen.
Mike, it was announced, as we always say, on June 10th of last year. So we're nearly at the end of June of the following, a year after it was announced. So that that information, that announcement fatigue is a very real thing, because that translates, if we were allowed to do what we used to do pre-COVID, to someone in a gym or in a pub or in a boxing gym or somewhere, just say, "Oh, leave me out, drop me out. I've had enough of it. I don't care." I've found myself in this last year saying, "I don't care. Leave me out. Turn over the page, turn over the record, whatever expression, generally with some more colourful, salty language in there." I've found myself saying that dozens of times in this last year or so for fights that are announced and then fall out of bed. And the whole Fury and Joshua thing, assuming they both come through startlingly and brilliantly in their next fights, their next defences, and then they do get together next year, I think a little bit's been lost. I think a little bit's been taken away. It doesn't mean it still won't generate millions. It doesn't mean it won't be a spectacular event, but it would have been a great event with no COVID if it had been in May of this year, outdoors at Wembley or outdoors at the Principality or up in Scotland or somewhere in the northeast or somewhere in the northwest or somewhere in the Midlands. And that, so we're losing just a little bit of it. And there's still plenty of it, don't get me wrong. but we're losing just a little bit of it. And sadly, I think that's having a detrimental effect on what we've got coming up on July 24th. Because, Mike, last year I was really excited for this rematch, and I'm still excited for this rematch. I love the way Malik Scott, with absolutely no track records, being reinvented as the guy who's inherited the training credentials from let's go back in time, from Manny Stewart, from Dundee, from every other great trainer in the world. Malik Scott's got absolutely no track record whatsoever. He's a very entertaining fellow. We've had him box in Britain. I've seen him box. I've interviewed him. I've had him on different shows. I've spoken to him. He's great. He's a great character. Malik Scott and those fantastic short little videos that he's been posting with him and Deontay Wilder in different locations, they're selling this fight. Let's get that right. Not Tyson Fury's latest suit, not Tyson Fury's latest shopping spree. No, Malik Scott and Deontay Wilder are selling this fight inch by inch by inch by inch, sale by sale by sale by sale. Hey, that's the way it goes. But saying that, Mike, I mean, can we move on? Because I hear you've done a blockbuster. We know you've done Bill Clinton in the past and Obama, because you tell us what you've done. In all fairness, if you don't mind me saying so, you've made a rod for your own back. You know, you ventured into Ethiopia and you found the greatest road athletes in the world. You ventured into Kenya, up into the mountains at altitude, and you found the greatest 10,000 meters runners. We know all of that. You've been right there at the heart and the core of so much. You've sat opposite Obama, you've sat opposite Clinton. So what people want is for me to shut up and for you to move on and let us hear your latest masterpiece with Wilder. I don't think I've oversold it. Let's get it right. I think I've just painted a picture.
Yeah, you've set it up. So here comes the fall. We were given access to both men in the run-up to the press conference. We'll hear from Tyson Fury in a moment, but first to Deontay Wilder. And I put it to him that it might have been difficult for him to keep his focus given all the debates around Anthony Joshua and Tyson Fury and how that fight seemed certain to go ahead. So how did Deontay Wilder keep his mind straight?
It wasn't difficult at all. You know, the Bible said silence is golden. So we stayed silent and kept training.
Just going back to that defeat in February of last year, Deontay, how long did it take you to process what had happened and why it had happened?
Just a few days. Once I got all the information in order.
And when you had that information, what conclusions did you come to?
And he is what he is, achiever.
And in terms of the third fight, what can you do differently?
That's the exciting part about it. Come July the 24th, you will see.
You've taken on or been working with, according to what we've seen online, Malik Scott. What's the thinking behind that, Deontay, and why him in particular?
Malik is a mastermind when it comes to boxing, and I'm a freak of nature when it comes to getting the job done. You put a genius mind of boxing together with a freak nature, you don't get nothing but a monster.
What was missing in your mind that Malik can add in terms of the elements that make you better?
Loyalty was missing. That's all. If I had loyalty, we wouldn't even be here.
Really? You think that was the sole reason for the setback 15 months ago, 16 months ago?
Man.
Given your judge of character, did you not sense at all that might be happening?
Well, sometimes you can get so busy that you can have people, wolves in sheep clothing.
Has it changed your outlook on life as well as boxing?
Just in boxing. In life, you understand the rats, the weasels that's in the world. But when you organize a team, you look for loyalty. And it's hard to see certain things when you have a team established, especially for years. As you can see, it's been many years has passed by that in that sheep clothing was just kept inside until that wolf had to come out of those clothing because those clothing got too tight and it was a discomfort for that person. And then he bust out.
Was there this feeling of unease even as you walked to the ring last time?
As soon as Chris took the mask off me, I knew what position I was in. I knew the feeling that I felt. I could have easily stopped the fight, but my warrior mentality, my warrior heart, my warrior mindset would allow me to. I was up for the challenge. And as you see, he still couldn't get me out, even though I was going through my trials and tribulations.
Is it personal with Tyson Fury?
Very.
More so than any opponent you've faced?
Ever.
Is that just because of the defeat, or is it deeper than that?
It's deeper than that.
Can you elaborate and tell us why it's gone deeper?
He's a cheat. A known cheat is death.
So many great names have become two-time champions, Deontay. How much does it matter to you to create that kind of legacy, to be remembered as somebody who, yes, had a setback, but like the greats, has overcome adversity? How important is it for you to make that statement this time?
One thing that's important to me right now is revenge. But I am rejuvenated due to the circumstances and the things that happened with the pandemic and different things like that. Being able to become even more closer with my family than I'm already is, and being able to work on other projects and not have to worry about things that others was worrying about in the pandemic.
So one last one from me, Deontay. Has that changed your whole approach to boxing as well, given you a different outlook on how much that means to you and how much it should mean to you, given what we've all learned in the last year or more?
No, the pandemic hasn't changed my view on boxing. I mean, the pandemic was what it was. It was a situation where you better take your ass and sit your ass down and go in the house before you get the corona. And, me and my family, we like I said, my family is close. So it just allowed, my wife and kids to become even closer, to do other activities that I probably wouldn't have had time to do on a normal circumstances or different things like that. But it haven't changed my mindset in boxing. It only gave me time to think about strategizing.
So you'll come back a better fighter?
That's what we shall see July the 24th.
Well, I've got to tell you, Mike, okay, it's not Clinton, it's not Obama, it's not Gene Kilroy at Ali's funeral, but that was a terrific interview. But I'll tell you one thing, and I've known you a long time, I've never known you work so hard. I could sense the sweat. Coming out of your head. I'd love to have been in the room with you. That was good, and no one else got that out of him last week. And that's not me. That's not me blowing smoke up your jacksie. That's a fact. I liked some of the stuff I heard there. In fact, I liked a lot of the stuff I heard there.
Yeah, you get the impression there's real resentment there, Steve, don't you? I think it would have been even more powerful had I been sat there face to face. It might have been more confrontational. It was very difficult with the time differences in the Zoom link and the waiting for the response. It could have been, I think, more of a kind of a tit for tat interview, and I think we'd have got even more from him. But you're right. I mean, he was very taciturn throughout that whole process. I mean, basically spoke one sentence at the press conference itself and then refused to engage with the compere on the day. So, I mean, we got seeds of what's going on in his mind there. There's no question about it. But you might also take the view, Steve, that what we heard there is a man who's been battered mentally as well as physically by Tyson Fury. It's from a distance, it's hard to read exactly how difficult a psychological hurdle he's going to have to overcome to turn it round next time round.
It's going to be a massive hurdle, Mike. Before that interview and during the last, 14, 15 months, we've had excuses, we've had people blamed Mark Breland. He was the man that obviously was accused of lacking in loyalty. We've heard so many ridiculous arguments about Tyson Fury's so-called tampered with gloves. We've heard so much stuff that's made us believe that he's slightly unstable, and as clear as he sounded there, some of the stuff was deeply paranoid. Some of that stuff was deeply flawed. Some of that stuff was obviously, we know, factually erroneous. We know all of that. But I love the idea that Malik Scott is a mastermind, and when you mastermind in the business of boxing, and I'm a genius in the business of boxing, and when you put them together, you create a monster. I mean, those are good lines. But I think there was, and I don't want to use the expression clutching at straws, but there was an awful lot of that. You know, Tyson Fury's this, he's that, he's this, he's that. And those are the only reasons I lost. But there was also a good line when he talked, I think Chris is his brother, isn't he? As a guy that was particularly unpleasant to most of the British media in February of last year. And when he said, I realised it was over, basically, when Chris took my mask off. And the mask is with reference to part of that ridiculous 50-pound or 25-kilo outfit he was wearing. There was a lot of little insights there, Mike. There's a lot of little bits and pieces there that give us and give the listeners just a little bit of a look inside what is clearly a very, very agitated and confused mind of the boxer Deontay Wilder. It's only added to the spectacle. I'm convinced of it.
In terms of him not talking at the press conference, Steve, and it being described in many places as one of the strangest, most bizarre press conferences the boxing world has ever seen, for me, what we saw in Los Angeles, I know was weird, but it barely makes the pound for pound list in terms of the crazy press conferences that we've seen down the years. You wouldn't know where to start with the list. I mean, there were the one in New York in 2002 ahead of the fight between Lennox Lewis and Mike Tyson, when Mike Tyson bit Lennox Lewis's thigh.
After Lennox whacked him with a right hand.
And that right hand, Steve, I promise you, if you look at that right hand at the press conference, it's almost identical to the right hand he threw in the 8th round of the fight to finish it. You watch it. You could superimpose the two if you were clever with filmmaking. I'm telling you could do that.
You know what, mate? It's one of those rare occasions, and I've seen an awful lot of scuffles, including the famous Herbie Hyde, Michael Bent scuffle on the roof of the hotel in East London. So I've seen an awful lot of scuffles and punches thrown. But without doubt, of all the scuffles, of all the punches thrown at press conferences, I don't mean melees after or before fights, press conferences, the right hand by Lennox Lewis remains the greatest right hand thrown at the press conference or a fight announcement. And you're absolutely right, Mike. We could sit here. I mean, I can give you 5 absolute blockbusters that what happened in Los Angeles last week into the shade. And I know you could come back with 5. And I'm not quite sure where I'd start. If you said to me, give me just 2, I'm not quite sure what 2. I'd have to chisel it down. I'll ask you, you give me one. Give me one that you were, to do this, give me one that you were at and one that maybe you weren't at but you know about.
Well, that first one is the one I wish I was at, Steve, because, it's strange to say that you want to be in the midst of violence like that, but in the job that we do, that would have been sensational to be reporting on. But you say give a couple of instances. I'll go to press conferences post-fight, Steve, and the Vitaly Klitschko and Derek Chisora press conference when David Haye walked in and that brawl erupted, and that was truly frightening to be around. I've got to say, Steve, that was uncontrolled violence. Yeah. And in 2015, David Haye again against Vladimir Klitschko in the post-fight press conference. When he put his toe on the table to say David, that was why he'd lost.
No, do you remember? And Manny Stewart and Vlad were winding him up, and you and I at the back, and we're doing it in slow motion. David, no, don't show him your toe in those sandals. And he stood up on the table, 6'2", 17 stone, with his toe in a pair of really bad sandals, swollen. And Vladimir said, Can I do? I won't do a Ukrainian accent, but I will. Imagine in Vladimir's deep Ukrainian English, he said, "David, that looks like a bee has stung your toe." And then Manny Stewart just shook his head and said, "We expected more." Meanwhile, Hay is stuck, standing on the table. Oh my! I've never felt so sorry for a fighter in all my life. That was more brutal than the punches thrown. Oh, Mike! I tell you one that I particularly like, Mike, and he wasn't even meant to be at the press conference. It was when Larry Holmes had a win on one of his comeback fights down in Hollywood, Florida. You know where I'm going with this, don't you? So he goes down to Hollywood, Florida, and he bashes up. I think he bashes up someone who then later goes on to shoot and kill his manager. You look at it. I think that's who the guy was. He's in prison still. Anyway, so at the end of the fight, there's a bit of an altercation because at the back of the arena is former world champion Trevor Burbick, and he obviously needs a few quid, and he's throwing a few insults at Larry, and Larry basically shuts him up. Larry goes up to his room to have a shower because he's going to go. He's playing on his band that evening, and when he's up in his room, his wife suddenly comes in, and she looks a little bit flustered. So Larry says to her, "What's the matter?" And she says, "Well, I've just bumped into Trevor Burbick and he's made some outrageous claims about you and some woman and that." So Larry gets himself dressed and he goes downstairs. And there's a scuffle, there's a great scuffle in the hallway of the hotel. We think that's it. And I say we because I really feel like I was there. We think that's it. Larry goes somewhere and Trevor Burbick goes outside. And he's approached by about 10 or 15 of the world's media. Mike Marley's there, a good friend of mine from New York who worked for, I think, the New York Daily Post at the time. And he's interviewing Trevor Burbick. And there's film of this, Mike, and you've seen it and you love it. I know you do. And anyone can go and find this. It's out there. It's available. And suddenly you get the sense, as they're interviewing Burbick, and Burbick's saying, "You know, the guy threw a punch at me, man. It's outrageous, man. Look, he's ripped my Hawaiian shirt." And suddenly you get the sense of something. And then in slow motion, people start to look to their right. They start to look to their right. And you can hear this noise, and it sounds like this. Boom, 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 boom. And there's someone running, and you're wondering, who's running? Who could possibly be running? And how can you hear it? Well, the reason you can hear it is because Larry Holmes, 20 stone at that particular time, is running along the top of a 40-foot-long white limo, and then he suddenly launches, and into vision comes Larry Holmes flying and landing on Trevor Burbick and Mike Marley. Now, in all fairness, Deontay and Tyson, you need to improve your game, son, because that's the type of carnage you're up against. That's a true story, buddy. You can go and find it. It's unbelievable.
Just imagine, Steve, in this world of social media, had that clip been sent around the world, viral just wouldn't do it justice. That was absolutely incredible. But we're going to hear from Tyson Fury now, Steve, and moving off onto another theme around press conferences, because I remember Sugar Ray Leonard back in 1987, indeed in the latter part of 1986, they had the first press conference ahead of his fight against Marvin Hagler, for which most people gave him absolutely no chance. He'd had one fight in 5 years. He was moving up to middleweight against one of the great champions of all time. But Sugar Ray Leonard has talked in the past, in interviews with me and elsewhere, about how he set the plan for the fight at the very first press conference. And he believes that Marvin Hagler was so blown away by the sheer confidence and the arrogance of Sugar Ray Leonard at the first press conference that Leonard believes that that's where he started the march to the victory that he got on points in April of 1987. And with that kind of theme in mind, Steve, I asked Tyson Fury how significant he felt that these press conference occasions were.
Not really, none. There's no significance in a press conference. It's just I'm just there to speak to the media, and that's it really, announce the fight. Like the antics that I do at press conference are not to get in people's minds or anything, just put on a bit of a show for the people to draw some interest to these boring fights that people are not interested in, i.e. the Klitschko thing. If I just went into the Klitschko press conference as a normal person, well, it'd just been Mr. Boring, because that's all it was, never more, anything more. So I bring entertainment every time, but there's no significance to it ever. It's just a press conference. We're just talking to each other, and we meet each other and we announce the fight. That's it.
Is it part of the process of getting your own mind in the right mood, in the right mode?
No, it doesn't have any physical, mentally, no connection at all to me. It's just a press conference. I'm only here because I have to be here to announce the fight, or else I don't even want to come to press conference. No interest in it. This, to me, is a hindrance. I've had to travel on a plane for an hour to come to Los Angeles to talk to the media when I should be training, you know. But it's only one day in a training camp, so it is what it is. I've no interest in press conferences and all that stuff. No interest in being famous or talking to the newspaper. I'm interested in training hard and doing my job, fighting.
And in terms of that, Tyson, how difficult has the last 15, 16 months been in terms of gearing your mind towards an exact date?
It hasn't been difficult, you know, because I've not been in this alone, been in it together as a united world. And it's been unfortunate for a lot of people. So I'm one of the people that's been blessed, and I didn't die during the COVID. So I'm in a happy place. You know, it could have been worse. I could have been buried 6 foot under by now. So, you know, I'm very thankful that I didn't. And for all the people who lost loved ones during the pandemic, my deepest condolences to them all.
And I know you've spoken in the past about how people have reached out to you when they're having their own issues. Has that kind of number, has that traffic increased over the last year or so?
Obviously, it's been a tough time for people mentally, physically, emotionally. But now we're trying to get out of it, and everyone's on the right path.
How has it changed, or has it changed your approach to boxing and to life in general?
You know, I'm happier. I'm happier now than I've ever been, to be fair. Can we shut up, please, while I'm doing an interview, or do I have to put this laptop down and walk out the room? That's what I'm saying. You'll have to excuse this, Mike, but I'm having a bit of a dilemma here with my own team.
That's fine for sound level.
It's a joke, isn't it? I'm trying to do an interview here, and everyone's playing on phones and talking conversations and all that.
Nice to know you've got control of the camp.
Wow. Let's go again. Sorry about that, Mike. I do apologise. Very unprofessional.
That's okay. You were talking about how it's changed your approach to boxing and to life in general, and how you feel better than you've ever felt.
Yeah, I feel good. I'm very happy that you know, I have a family. I have people who care about me, and you know, we spent a lot of time together over the pandemic. I believe the pandemic brought everybody closer together. Neighbours, families, friends, that sort of thing. You know, you really appreciate what you had before the pandemic, even more now, because you know it could be taken away from you at any time.
And in terms of the amount of training that you've done, how much of that over the time was geared towards Anthony Joshua?
None of it. I don't train for any specific people. I'm a boxing man. I'm a fighting man. They're all the same. They're only boxers, only throw punches. None of it was trained to Anthony Joshua and Deontay Wilder. I was training for me as a man, as a person, for my own mental and physical well-being.
What about in terms of the date? I was listening to a podcast that you recorded in the week of the Billy Joe Saunders and Canelo Alvarez fight that you did with Eddie Hearn, and it seemed as though everything was over the line for Saudi Arabia, August the 14th. Was your head fixed into that date?
No, I wasn't in training camp then. I wasn't preparing for any fights. I was on holiday. I was over here supporting Billy Joe. I came over here for a month to do a month's training camp with Billy for moral and physical support. I wasn't here for a fight myself. I was just here to support Billy in his conquest. So yeah, we was all gearing up for the fight, but the arbitration judge made his decision, and that's the end of that. That's all she wrote. There's not much. It was out of my hands. Like, I couldn't have physically, mentally, emotionally done anything about it. It was totally out of my hands, and it was done.
And Bob Arum and Eddie Hearn have been going back and forwards with their idea of what was happening around the arbitration. What was your reading of the situation? Was it always a serious impediment as far as you were concerned?
Well, I think when you're in a binding mediation with anybody in arbitration, then it's definitely a serious thing. But it was what it was. I think we're all in the same boat with it all. It was always looming and lurking. And I said in many interviews that there's a court case going on, and I wouldn't be surprised if I have to fight Deontay Wilder next. And it came out, and that's what it was. I was gearing up, and everyone was gearing up for the Joshua fight. It wasn't supposed to be. The judge made his final decision, and that's it. He can't fight anybody else, unfortunately.
Are you confident that the Joshua fight at some stage will happen?
I have no interest in Joshua, to be honest. I'm here to fight Deontay Wilder. I couldn't give a if Joshua had done whatever he does. If he gets knocked out in his next fight, none of my interest. I can only be accountable for my own self. And I've got one dangerous man in front of me, so I don't need to focus on anybody else. I'm no interest in anybody else in the division, only Deontay Wilder. He's a serious threat.
in terms of Deontay Wilder having changed trainers now, you've changed trainers and you know what it can do for you. What do you think it might do for him?
Might do nothing. Might get him knocked out quicker. That's what it might do.
And just to wrap up pretty much where we started, Tyson, about, how people have suffered during the pandemic, how important do you think, whether it's sport or some other event, an event of this magnitude is in terms of what might be called the healing process for everybody?
It was a lonely time when there were no live sports going on in the first lockdown, when we had it, like when nothing was open. And there was no sports going on. But I think when we got the live sports back, it sort of helped everybody. And I don't think people really realised how important sport is until it's gone. Until you have no football left, no boxing, nothing. You're just watching repeats of stuff that you already know the results of. So I think these major events are very important to the world. Gives people something to watch, something to look forward to, something to be a part of.
Great stuff. Thanks for your time, Tyson. Appreciate it.
Mike, bye-bye.
Stevie seems like a man in control.
Yeah, I mean, he sounded as calm and relaxed there as possible. I thought perhaps one or two of his answers were not maybe fibs, but maybe, pulling back a little bit. I think he was upset and hurt when the Joshua fight fell out of bed, and he wouldn't be human if that wasn't the case. And I thought one or two other answers were maybe leading us away from things. But I'll be honest with you, Mike. I liked what I heard there. I liked a bit of focus come back, because I've been slightly worried. I've been saying for 2 or 3 months I've been a bit concerned. I mean, from the back in about March, when he was at 1 or 2 shows talking about how much he was drinking again, and even though I don't think he was drinking what he said he was drinking, and then in and around the Billy Joe Saunders fight, I'm glad he cleared that up. That was really good. That wasn't my training camp. I was there for support, moral support. It wasn't my training camp. That's quite good, because there was a big difference with that, because I thought that was the start of his training camp. But there you go. And it's been a while, Mike. It's been an awful long while. It's been an awful long while where he's been basically a nomad. In different parts of America with different people, either the team, we heard the team there, scuffling and shuffling and shouting and screaming in the background. And then also with his family. And then also just maybe with his brother, young Tommy. So what I think we heard there was finally, long rambling answer, sorry. What we finally heard there, I think, was a man that has a date now, has an opponent, and he's just cracking on with it.
And we've had a couple of emails relating to Tyson Fury, Steve. The email address, costellobunce@bbc.co.uk. Lyndon Barreto says, I'm just going to leave the attached photo here, Tyson Fury shopping for a private jet. And I'm thinking about John Fury's comments about yes men and ego inflators around Tyson Fury, and of Marvelyn Hagler's quote about silk pyjamas. Is the Gypsy King in trouble? Less than 8 weeks until his next fight. Plenty of room to spin the narrative of the Fury-Wilder gap closing from the last fight. Is this arguably then more tantalising than the second fight? Is there more on the line than 18 months ago? How is this possible? The sweet science of boxing, ! Andrew Musselwhite, I'm sure other listeners as well would love to get your perspective on this. Tyson Fury said that he was planning to be near 300 pounds. That's well over 21 stone for his fight with Wilder. Clearly his plan is to execute the same plan that worked so well in the second fight. However, he was 272 pounds in that fight, which is around 19 stone 6. And I wonder if an extra 20 pounds might affect his movement in the ring. What do you think? I would say, Steve, that quite often, as you alluded to there, we hear from Tyson Fury that he takes us off in one direction and actually does the exact opposite.
No, there's no chance he'll be 300. That's him saying, like he told Barry Jones back in March, that he was drinking 18 pints of lager a night. He wasn't drinking 18 pints of lager a night. He's not going to be 300 pounds, and no one should imagine he will be 300 pounds. I'd be amazed if he's anything above what he was last time. If not, he might even be a little bit lighter, because that's still an awful lot heavier, remember, than Deontay Wilder. He's not fighting a heavyweight. He's fighting a very slight but tall heavyweight.
More to come on your emails, and a lot of traffic on referees and towels, but we're concentrating for now on the weekend's action, Steve. Naoya Inoue